I am now recording this. I never remember to say that. I am very out of practice on Zoom. I will share some links here in just one moment, but here you go. For me, my favorite class of talking was debate. Honestly, I moved around a whole lot when I was a kid, just randomly never had an English class I super connected with, which is ironic because I now teach English. But my debate teacher was one of the best people I've ever met, and really is Mr. Keenan. And I really feel like I learned more about reading and writing in debate than in any class, almost any class even in college level than so I love talking in that class. So, all right. Thank you so much. We have a really weird timeline, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I did want to talk really quick about that connection question and what I did there. Every seminar I do, I start with a connection question. And what am I doing with that? Well, first and foremost, I'm sneaking in a little bit of context for the lesson. They're usually easy-ish to answer questions that sort of suggest what we're going to talk about. So that question sort of suggests we're going to talk today about talking in class, right? Keep it short. Usually I'll have I'll say 1 or 2 sentence answer, talk for maybe 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds if we go around and share in a circle. Of course, avoid yes or no questions. And then I like to say also give it space. If let's say that even though I'll usually say talk for about 10 seconds, you will often have one student who had some really wild experience talking in their 3rd grade class where a teacher got angry at them and they learned a really important life lesson. I would just give it space and let it go. Often you can have cool conversations develop from those questions, So before I get to the objectives, I want to say what I'm going to do today. The way this structure, I'm going to talk about what's the agenda, the resource bank, and welcome. Hello. Hold on a second. I'm going to talk first about the agenda. And really, I think more of that agenda document as a resource bank. Welcome. If you're just joining us, I'm going to give you some links there in the chat. I was just going over the agenda, so you didn't miss a whole lot yet. I want to talk about the history and philosophy behind these 2 different discussion ideas I'm going to give you that I've been using for a long time. And I'm going to break down the 2 different protocols. And I should say one I've been using for a long time. The second one called Connections is very experimental. Just finished it last week. So, and then we'll have as much time as we need at the end for questions. So by the end of today, I really want you to know the history, philosophy, and structure behind these 2 different discussion ideas. For a whole class discussion, the design is to allow every voice to speak. It's going to be a lot because the time is about 30 minutes and we're virtual. I'm going to kind of walk you through it. If we were in person, I'd love to demonstrate a lesson. I think there wouldn't be a lot of utility doing that virtually because it's definitely an in real life experience for me. So, and by the end of this lesson, you will walk away literally with 168 lesson plans. If you click on that agenda link, they're there. And probably more importantly, there's 2 lesson plan formats that you can use for your own content. What that agenda resource bank has is the folder I'm going to talk about in a second: 128 Socratic seminar lessons, 40 connections curriculum lessons that I just made, 2 different discussion logs I'll talk about at the end, and then 3 different templates. One is the newer update. It's honestly not very different. It just looks a little nicer, and I edited out some stuff and made it the transitions are a little smoother. An old blank Socratic seminar template, tried and true method, and then this very experimental, very new, I finished it last week, blank connections discussion. So first, how I came to these 2 different ideas. And I say I, and whenever I say I can always replace it with the word we. So it's definitely a democratic experience. So I started teaching at a school called Washington High School in Kansas City, Kansas. Long story short, our scores on the Kansas reading assessment were low, and we wanted to engage in a whole school literacy initiative. And we fell in love with a particular one. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a group of teachers who went to Van Horn High School, where we saw our former principal had instituted the St. John's College Touchstones curriculum. And what that was a curriculum centered on sort of context-free discussions of philosophical issues. So students would discuss, Aristotle, a passage from Aristotle or Plato or Galileo or you name it. Tend to be the classic classics, right? When I walked into that environment and I saw, this is my third year teaching, I considered myself like a growing teacher. Maybe I'd be good one day. I didn't consider myself a great teacher at the time, but I walked in and saw in just a random homeroom class at Van Horn High School, kids discussing with more authority than I personally felt I had to talk about Aristotle. They were discussing ancient Greek philosophy. It was a truly mind-altering experience for me. I saw the heretofore limits I had for what I thought was possible really were exploded. So what we did then at Washington is we had a once weekly in homeroom advisory, once weekly whole school discussion seminar that everyone participated, everyone in the building, every teacher, English, math, gym, PE, ROTC, every teacher had a homeroom and every teacher was doing the same Socratic seminar. Every student, from your college lit seniors to quote unquote on-level freshmen. I don't like that term, but for lack of a better term, quote unquote on-level freshmen. We were all doing the exact same discussion strategy. So everyone could be talking about it for the, past the classroom. So it was a process, definitely, that had a lot of successes and it had some definite drawbacks. Using the St. John's curriculum. And what we learned early on is there were some things we wanted to keep. We kept the format, some of the language and some of the big ideas. So connection, initial question, one central short-ish text, reflection questions. And we kept also the basic idea of context-free philosophical focus. We resisted the urge to talk about like modern current events, because we found students would kind of come in with their minds formed already about what was going on in the news. But we made some modifications that we really felt we needed to make to serve our students. And the first was updating it from classic text to modern voices, and especially expanding it to a diversity of voices and more speakers from marginalized communities. So the names I've mentioned so far, Socrates, Aristotle, Galileo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are a part of the quote unquote sort of traditional, I would say outdated canon that is, frankly, it was not representative of our student body. It was 70% African-American, 20% white, 10% Asian, 5% Hispanic school at the time. So it just wasn't clicking for us exactly. So we wanted to develop new conversations, but still around philosophical issues. So we also wanted to be really careful about not being condescending. And the pitfall in English I've seen some people fall into. If you have like Maya Angelou, you give her you're going to include a text where she talks about the modern Black experience, but then you'll go to like Mark Twain, and Mark Twain's going to talk about what it's like to feel lonely, and then you'll go to Audre Lorde, and she's going to talk also about the modern Black experience. And if you're not careful, it can become a very, very subtly racist, limitation of voices you're using in the curriculum. So we wanted that was one of our goals, to make sure, Maya Angelou should be allowed in our curriculum to talk about whatever she wants, of course, but we would include a text by Alice Walker talking about what it means to be silent and the nature of silence, right? Or Maya Angelou talking about what home is, which is one of my favorite seminars. It's really a beautiful thing, right? So not to say we're not, throwing those conversations out, they exist, but not just to only use those conversations for certain marginalized populations. So Anyway, the result of this is we learned, if we wanted to do this every week, that we couldn't repeat anything. So a freshman, we bit off a lot. A freshman we can't do the same exact curriculum next year because they'd be like, I talked about this, I'm done. So at the end of it, we had 128 lesson plans, 32 per year, no repeats, 4 volumes. Our philosophy that we honed over time was, the seminar is founded on the idea that through their words, ideas, questions, students will reveal themselves not just to others, but really to themselves. Rather than teach students how to think, the goal was to create and facilitate a dialectical space for students where they could interrogate their world and understand it as an individual and shared experience. I borrowed that word interrogate. I think Jonathan Kozol uses that word, I know, in a quote that I love, so interrogate reality is the quote I'm using. We honestly at the time weren't talking about social emotional learning. This was about a decade ago. But I realize now in retrospect, students doing seminar are doing the work of social emotional learning. They're building and maintaining a community, developing healthy relationships with peers, managing their own responses, and identifying opportunities for personal growth and also collective change. So, one of my favorite people, Dr. Greg Netzer, as he put it in an email to me, this is verbatim quote, I copied and pasted it into this. Once a person begins to live the life of the mind, there is no going back. This is our ethos. I really had fun finding this email from 10 years ago. So anyway. Okay. With the time remaining, I want to talk about the 2 different strategies that I like to use where you get every voice speaking. The first is the one I've talked most about so far, Socratic seminar, and the second is what I'm calling connections. It's a new one, experimental. So share this link. So there's 6 steps to the way we did Socratic seminar. You start with the connections round, then you have an artifact. Like in English, it's a passage. In science, it might be, a word problem or a literal artifact in some other classes, a DBQ in history. In the reading and annotating phase, I'll ask students to write and annotate and then come up with an individual question for the group. We'll share out questions, and then it's very scripted up to step 5. And then step 5 is close to no script at all. Large group conversation for 15 minutes. And then we engaged in a written reflection. I'd like to do spoken reflections now. So I'm going to share a sample seminar in the chat. This is plucked from, oh no, the spinning wheel of death. Please don't. Okay, I have a Mac. I'm not used to using this in the building all the time. I think I'm still here. So there is the link. I'm gonna axe that because it was scaring me. It should send you to, yes, Maya Angelou Socratic seminar. You will actually see page 1 is we used to write teacher guides. Like I said, everyone in the building was doing this. So you might have like a ROTC teacher, gym teacher, even an English teacher, someone who just wasn't feeling it, someone who's burnt out on homeroom. I get it. That's cool. That's you do you. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for anyone at any level to be able to do this, which actually brings me to my next point. Here's what it looked like. We started with a connections question, and this is verbatim. Frankly, it's almost like a sub-plan level of, if you had a really effective sub, you could literally just read every single word and go through the whole, as long as you had a timer, you could go through the whole curriculum, right? Around the whole protocol. So I would say, okay, we're in a circle, in a discussion circle, everyone shares a short answer to the question below. In this piece, Maya Angelou writes a letter to herself as a child. What is one piece of advice you would give your younger self? Let's go ahead and take 2 minutes, write down one answer, and then we'll go around and share. We'll talk for about 10 seconds. Anyway, so that round takes about 5 minutes. It's a question that hints at, sneaks in some context, hints at the artifact we're going to look at in round 2. We'll go around and share out our answers. And then we'll get into round two. And round two is where we look at the text or the artifacts. So read and annotate. It takes about 8 minutes. One person reads the piece out loud. Then everyone silently annotates, marking at least 3 things and writing a comment for each. So at the beginning of the year, I'll actually read it out loud. And over time, I like to kind of know who feel out who feels comfortable reading out loud. We'll go through it. Usually takes about a minute or so to read out loud. And then we reserve the remaining time for silent annotation, right? All right, welcome. If you're just joining us, we're just going over this link. Is that right? I think it is. Welcome. I'm going over one of the 2 discussion strategies I'm giving you today. So I like to actually blend step 2 into step 3, the individual question where I'll say, I'll look around, it's quiet. I'll have phrases I've normalized or like, I'm looking around, I still see about half of our pencils moving. That's cool. If you haven't yet, go ahead and flip over to the back and let's start thinking about question 3. Step 3 asks us to come up with an individual question that you could share with the class and write it below. Here's an example. Do you feel that you can always go home after you leave? That kind of thing. So get to that. Step 4 is where we share out our individual questions. I'll say each seminar member shares his or their, I've updated that, shares out their question. Note 5 interesting questions by writing down the speaker's name. That's a really important step. I will tell them, please don't write down the whole question. You will get lost trying to remember what was said. So just write down the name. That way you can just ask them what their question was. And that way you don't ignore the next 7 people talking. So if you like this strategy, I'm going to time out here for a second. I'm going to lift the veil a little bit. And I will just say that step 4 is, for me, the magic step. Magic is the word for me because everyone, even the shy kids, I was super shy when I was a kid in high school. Like I said, I moved around a lot, had to meet new friends all the time. So I guarantee you what I was doing is I was staring like a deer in headlights at step 5, which is where it's really kind of awkward and quiet. Large group conversation, unstructured. And I was nervous about that step. So I didn't have my eyes on step 4. So that's the sleight of hand, right? So when it came to me, I was fine. I would I'll just read what I wrote. I will say that I don't know how this works. The only thing I can think of is the word magic, but I tend to have 95 to 100% sharing rate on step 4. And it is on a close to spiritual plane for me, the level of questioning. I'm just so enthralled with how good the questions are invariably that kids come up with, no matter what level. I don't believe in tracking, but to use the terms I used earlier on, college lit seniors or on level freshmen, I have always gotten interesting questions, thoughtful questions, right? So that to me is why I consider this magic, because every voice has spoken by this. Usually every voice has spoken by this step. And then whatever happens in step 5, it's a process, right? I have discussions all the time that look like train wrecks where it's hard to get anyone to talk, or maybe way too many people are talking. Maybe just one corner of the circle is talking. Quadrant. I don't know. Radius. So the circle is talking. But it's okay. It's like I've set myself up for that process, and whatever happens in that, right? So I'll say we're gonna move on to the large group conversation, highlight interesting questions from step 4, discussion in a large group. This is where the real work comes in. I talk way too much about seminar. I could talk for two more hours about step 5. So I'm gonna actually not talk about it, because there are a million different, every group of 20 to 30 kids is gonna have a million different variables for what step 5 looks like. I'd love to chat with you about it one-on-one, but because of our time, I'm going to pause right here. And then we finish with a reflection question of right at the time we were doing writing in a journal. It could also be a spoken reflection. What works for your group. Okay, really quick, I wanted to talk also about this new sort of experimental idea I came up with, which is what's called the connections curriculum. I'm calling it the connections curriculum. And I'm not even totally sure how I'm going to use this yet, but I'm looking next year. I will have a seminar, an advisory again for the first time in about 10, almost a decade at this point, it feels like. So I don't know, 8 years, literally. So I'm in RT right now. Next year, I'll just going back to the classroom. So I love advisor. I'm very excited to have this again. And I came up with this idea of a 30-minute discussion for one of our homeroom advisory. At Northwood, we have 30-minute, two 30-minute meetings a week. I was thinking maybe I could use one of them for a seminar thing, but I knew I had to shorten it for this. So I kept the connections question. This is a sample one from, I think, the third unit. I created 4 units with 10 lessons each. Just finished last week, so it's definitely experimental. There will be changes. Connections question looks identical. In this reading, Gloria Angelou talks about how important her language is to her. Have you ever been mocked because of the way you speak or write? Okay, so it suggests the artifacts. I will say this is in step, or what I'm calling the third unit. So I don't know, I probably wouldn't start the year with a question like that, because it's kind of, there would be some trigger warnings. I want to feel out the community a little bit. But I might change it a little bit, which is totally fine. Because I have less time in 30 minutes, I scaffolded the annotation and I shortened the text, the passage, right? So it's a short paragraph, and I gave them 4 scripted questions. So what questions does this reading spark? How are you? Similarities, how are you like the speaker? Differences, how are you different from the speaker? And confusions, what parts of this reading are confusing? And I'll just say, we'll take about 15 minutes. Let's read for about 5. And I've only done this a few times so far. And so far I've liked it. I like this strategy a lot. It's definitely taken a lot of modeling because it's new. So I've draw on the whiteboard the quadrants and all, here's a question I have. I'm not sure what she means when she says legitimacy. What does that mean? So I write down, what is legitimacy? Feel free to copy me if you want, but I'm going to ask you to come up with your own here in a moment. So anyway, it's been like 5 to 10 minutes of modeling in my English class, but I like it so far. I like this strategy. And then I don't think we're going to write our reflection, but you could. I think we'll just transition to reflection questions for about 5 minutes. Choose one of these. What was your favorite question from the day? What did you like about it? How could it have gone better? Something you wanted to say, but you couldn't. Did you change your mind about the reading? Those kinds of questions, right? The last thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'll stay on as long as anyone would like to be on here, is I do have a way of tracking data, although this is a very, very holistic method. This document, frankly, is an analog document. It is not a digital document. Oh, I'll share it. It's connections question, connections discussion log. The last link I just put in there. I print this out. It's for printing out in handwriting. So I just like to track who is speaking, how often people are speaking. I have a little circle in the corner. I like to write initials. It helps me to see patterns. So you'll see, like, what if things are only being talked about over here? So maybe I could split up the seating a little bit, And then I especially like this category of how many times is someone called on? How many times does someone speak unprompted? Those kinds of things. And then I grade out this at the bottom. I just like to keep notes down here. So if you develop a better one, it works for me. Hopefully it might work for you also. So, okay. I think I'm about at time. I did want to say the last thing. If you need to log off, you're not required to be here, but thank you so much for coming. But I did want to say 3 things. First and foremost, talking about seminar is my favorite thing in the world. For real, I will drop everything to do it. And some days, if I am scoring progress checks, I will gladly drop everything to do it. So please email me, or if you want, I'll share my my cell, or if you want to Zoom, or I guess in theory, I could even come over to Northwood, or I could go to your school. I'm happy to maybe that could happen. But anyway, I'd love to chat about Socratic Seminar. Please email me. Oh, and also, I forgot about this, but if you don't mind filling out the survey that they asked me to share. There you go. Sorry for my kind of brusque chat messages yelling the word survey right there. And I did want to stay on if anyone had any questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. And by all means, go ahead and share any questions or ask away. Happy to talk.
How often do you do that? Like, do you do these type of things?
Yeah, that's a great one. Someone last time had that question. So for me personally, no more than once a week. Once a week seems like a magic number. And I say that because like I in the past, I have tried to do it more than every time I try and do it more than once a week, I feel like I get diminishing returns. And it's sort of like, it gets a little bit too relaxed in ways that I like it to be relaxed, but sometimes it's like, if we're a little too relaxed on the norms, then we're having to go back to this norm conversation. And that's important, but less interesting to me than talking about Alice Walker, or that would be the maximum, I would say, but maybe we do it if I'm doing a mini unit, like 4-week unit. I love to use it. I do that a lot. We'll have one big Socratic seminar on a text, maybe a passage from Of Mice and Men, something like that. That's going to guide us, and we can keep our notes on the whiteboard or something like that. So yeah, so maybe some people might, I don't personally consider myself like a master teacher. So if some people may be able to, it's been tempting to just do seminar every day. But probably a bit much. Yeah, so.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, any other questions for me? Oh yeah. Of course, yeah. Thank you. So all the messages I'm getting in the chat. I'm not great at walking and chewing gum. So yes, thank you so much for coming. Happy to chat about it. And the agenda has all the links. So if you need anything, I would go there first. So, all right. Thank you, Carrie and Kate and Shelley. It's nice to meet you. All right. Thanks, Ed Camp.